Greetings, G Life Forms. This is G Messenger, Orev Shalom, level 32. I'm talking with God this Shabbat, and I wanted to share with y'all because I'm reflecting on rule number 2, or in the physical spiritual balance, rule number 15. Oh man. I'm reflecting how it came from my son. We was reading over Genesis chapter 3. Let's go for the ride. Now, the serpent was more crafty than any wild animal which Adonai God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you are not to eat from any tree in the garden?" Now, before we keep going, it's something on the side. I was watching a video on YouTube, and Dame Dash said one of the things that he had a problem with in the Bible was this particular passage. How he said that anyone that's coming to do you harm isn't coming like a serpent. They're coming like something you don't see coming, so that way they can be deceptive and they can get you off guard. They won't come as something terrifying that's showing you their nature. And he said that he agreed with that, the fact that it was a serpent. The thing about it, you have to realize Adam and Eve. Adam was walking around fellowshipping, naming animals. None of these animals attacked him. Animals that are dangerous today, he was naming them, around them, lived amongst them in the forest, in the Garden of Eden. So the fact that that Eve wasn't alarmed that the serpent, not only was it a serpent, but it was also talking to her as well. It kind of leads me to also believe, on a side note, that not only was he just naming the animals, but he could also communicate and understand the animals as well. Dr. Doolittle on a real spiritual tip, so to speak. So Eve wasn't afraid of the serpent. She wasn't afraid of any animal. Neither was Adam. They lived in harmony with all animals. And the fact that the serpent was actually speaking a language that they could understand, obviously animals speaking a language that they can understand must not have been this new phenomena either. Just a side note, that has nothing really to do with the lesson. Just my mind kind of wandered off into that as we was reading. Let's continue. Okay. The woman answered the serpent, "We may eat from the fruit of the trees of the garden, but about the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you are neither to eat from it nor touch it, or you will die." So she knew, Adam knew when Eve came. God let her know. It wasn't even something that Adam passed down to her for her to know. God communicated with her himself and told her, you are not to eat or touch this tree. The serpent said to the woman, "It's not true that you will surely die, because God knows that on the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God." Excuse me. "Knowing good and evil." I'm sure that that has to be appetizing. You're sitting there, you're like, man, I won't die. In fact, I'll be just as wise as God if I eat from it. I can understand him telling me not to eat from it if I will be just as wise as he is, should I choose to do it. Serpent was making sense to the woman. When the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it had a pleasing appearance, and that the tree was desirable for making one wise, she took some of its fruit and ate. She also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate. They both ate. He was with her. He didn't interrupt the serpent. He didn't step in and say, we were supposed to serve God. God commanded it. Hey, woman, don't be entertained by that. We know what God told us to do. Let's just obey God. He didn't step in. He was also enticed by the idea of being just as wise as that holy, anointed, highest God was who he was fellowshipping with. I can be like that. I can be like God. He knows that I'll become like him. What is he holding us back from? He didn't interrupt either, and they all knew they were not supposed to. And I also think that it shows how far along, while we sit and say we would have done something different, it shows how far along Adam and Eve was above the rest of the generations of people coming after the highest God to follow him. They only had one commandment, which was simply not to touch or eat from this one tree. When the Israelites was led after Exodus, they got 10 commandments. And when you look at where things are today, we have 613 commandments. And in fellowshipping with God, we came up with family rules, and God gave us as a family 30 more. So it goes to show you that the further we slip away from God, the more rules he's having to put in place to keep us from destroying ourselves. Let's continue. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized that they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together to make themselves loincloths. They heard the voice of Adonai God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze. So the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Adonai God among the trees in the garden. You have to hide yourself to sin against God. I think this makes me reflect on times that I've personally sinned. And I knew that if I were to talk to God, instead of doing the sin, I knew it was an either or thing. I knew it was no way that I could talk and fellowship with God and do this sinful action at the same time. It's really one or the other. They chose to sin, and when the presence of God came, they hid themselves from him. But had they not chose to sin and had the presence of God came, they would have stayed in that presence like they always have. Adonai God called to the man. Where are you? He answered. I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and so I hid myself. He said, who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree from which I ordered you not to eat? Instead of saying, "Yes, Father, forgive me," the man replied, "The woman you gave to be with me, she gave me fruit from the tree, and I ate." Adonai, God, said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman answered, "Not with 'forgive me, Father.' I was enticed by the draw to be wise as you. I have made a terrible mistake. I throw myself at your mercy. Please find forgiveness for me." That's not what she said. She answered, "The serpent tricked me, so I ate." Adonai, God, said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all livestock and wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and eat dust as long as you live. I will put animosity between you and the woman, and between your descendant and her descendant. He will bruise your head, and you will bruise his heel." To the woman he said, "I will greatly increase your pain in childbirth. You will bring forth children in pain." She was not meant to bear forth children in pain at first. Your desire will be toward your husband, but he will rule over you. To Adam he said, "Because you listened to what your wife said and ate from the tree about which I gave you the order, you are not to eat from it. The ground is cursed on your account. You will work hard to eat from it as long as you live. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat field plants. You will eat bread by the sweat of your forehead till you return to the ground, for you were taken out of it. You are dust, and you will return to dust." And as I was reading this with my son, 8 years old, just turned 8 years old at the time. As I was reading this with him, I let him know this is why humans die. This is why man dies. He was like, he said Adam was stupid for eating the fruit. And I asked him, I was like, "Well, now wait a minute. God told him not to eat, but the serpent told him, you won't die. If anything, you will become like God." Now, I didn't get all the way to the end, so we hadn't read yet all the way down. So up until now, he really didn't know the real consequences of eating the fruit and disobeying God. And I said, "Well, wait a minute, son. The serpent said, surely you won't die. If anything, God knows that you'll become as wise as God." And he paused and he thought. And he looked at me and he said, "But I don't believe the serpent." The highest God used my kid that day to give him a family rule. Family rule number 2. Don't believe the serpent. I'm meditating on these rules right now, and that whole moment just came before me. You also got a little bit more than what I anticipated talking about, but hey, who tries to put a boundary on fellowshipping with God, right? I mean, if it comes out, it comes out. Like, and I practice allowing the Holy Spirit to take control of me anytime he sees fit. So, while I just meant to just tell you that, you got all the other extra. Have a wonderful, not a wonderful, but a wonderful Shabbat. Keep it holy today, best you know how. May the Lord strengthen his relationship with us all. Shalom.